उर्दू है मेरा नाम, मैं खुसरो की पहेली।
बहुत अच्छी नज्म है भाई, वाह 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 वाह। उर्दू है मेरा नाम, मैं खुसरो।
उर्दू है मेरा नाम, मैं खुसरो की पहेली। मैं मीर की हमराज हूँ, गालिब की सहेली।
वाह।
उर्दू है मेरा नाम, मैं खुसरो की पहेली। दक्कन के वली ने मुझे गोदी में खिलाया,
वाह।
सौदा के कसीदों ने मेरा हुस्न बढ़ाया। दक्कन के वली ने मुझे गोदी में खिलाया, सौदा के कसीदों ने मेरा हुस्न बढ़ाया। है मीर की अजमत के मुझे चलना सिखाया।
क्या कहने भाई, वाह 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 वाह।
है मीर की अजमत के मुझे चलना सिखाया।
क्या शख्सियत के
मैं दाग के आंगन में खिली बन के चमेली। उर्दू है मेरा नाम, मैं खुसरो की पहेली।
भाई इकबाल साहब, वाह वाह।
गालिब ने बुलंदी का सफर मुझको सिखाया, हाली ने मुरव्वत का सबक याद दिलाया।
Sorry it took us a while to get this started. Welcome, thank you all for coming. This is Triangulations, which is a theme series of talks. Our first theme is looking at language and vernacular. So each talk will be, each theme will be addressed via 3 talks. And we had a first one 2 weeks ago, which looked at indigenous languages and accents in the Emirates. And then the one we have upcoming one is looking at literature in Southeast Asia. The one we have today is presented by Khalid, which is looking at the language separation and purification between Hindi and Urdu and tracing that history. Khalid actually wrote this piece for us on the state first about what is the state? The state we're a publishing practice based out of Dubai. So we kind of do different experimental publications, also themed. We also have an online presence which publishes much more regularly. And then but actually Rajat was one of our writers on the blog, and she wrote this piece which looked at the kind of contemporary Hindi television over Sanskritization of Hindi titles, Bollywood titles really. Which then we once we were kind of making this thing, we thought this would be a great addition to it overall. So Rajat is a Dubai-based artist and writer. She has a project called Minor Histories Archive. She's also one of the coordinators for...
Oh, the coordinator.
Sorry, the coordinator. Okay, yeah, the coordinator of the AIR, Artist President's Program. So Rajat will go and speak for 25-30 minutes or so, and then Rahel Aima here, who's my co-editor at the stage, will moderate the session, and then during that you guys can jump in with any questions or comments. So, oh, she said co-editor at the stage. So please join me in giving a warm welcome.
Good evening. Just want to start by thanking you all for coming, turning up for something that's titled what it is titled. Before I begin, I just want to put all my cards on the table, which is that I am an artist, not a linguist or an academic or a researcher or a historian. And the research that you're about to see was undertaken for a studio project. And when it developed and got big, it just became a thing of its own, and that's why I wrote the piece that I wrote for the state. So basically, a few years ago, I was starting an MFA program at Cornell. And one of the projects I was looking at was the opening sequences of Bollywood cinema from the 60s and 70s. and I started to notice this almost Rosetta Stone in the titles, which is the name would turn up in English, Hindi, and the Vernacular script, which is on the left, and Urdu in the Nastaliq script, which is on the right. And then abruptly, around the mid-90s, I noticed that these were disappearing, which is the one on the right. The Nastaliq script sort of almost fell out of the right. And when it does turn up now, it seems a little like there's a kind of cultural dissonance about it. At the same time that I was doing this project, I used to come home for the summer, and my mom used to watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on Indian TV. And Amitabh Bachchan, who's sort of like a demigod in India, his speech on that show is getting heavily Sanskritized. I used to be able to understand it, and now I can just about make out what he has to say. Some of the terminology is getting very overtly Hindu. And my experience of Indian TV is that it started off very pluralistic. Like in the early 90s, you had arcs, representing different faiths and different parts of India, and then suddenly I started to notice this sort of Hinduization, and it involved this sort of increasing use of Sanskrit, very difficult vocabulary. He used to refer to the computer screen as computer G, like Mr. Computer, and then he started referring to it as Buddhimanji, which is a very Sanskrit term for someone who's revered, and it just struck a chord. At the same time, my mom also continues to watch a TV courtroom drama called Al-Halla, and one of the main characters in this show is known for using incredibly heavy, difficult Sanskrit vocabulary. So much so that it's become an internal sort of joke within the show, where people have to keep asking him to repeat what he's saying. And so for a medium that is for a mass audience, in India where you have different dialects, this heavy use of Sanskrit was starting to confuse me. I started wondering, where did this change happen, and why this thing that was once really familiar started seeming really different and difficult to me. And also this question that keeps coming up when I'm from a Pakistani background, but when someone asks you what's the difference between Hindi and Urdu, I mean, I used to just say it's the script, but I mean, when you look at the history, it's just so complex and colorful. And so this research that I'm going into now looks at how those two things became different, and how they came to represent two different countries, which have this very nice clean border between them. So before I kind of begin, I just want to lay out a critical framework. Carl Deutsch, a political scientist, talks about people turning into nationalities, turning into nations. And a lot of when we look at language in India, you kind of have to maintain these parameters of how this was a massive area, and then you start making borders around it, and what is it that made India overtly Hindu or Pakistan Islamic. And so when you look at the language, it is racial, it is religious, and so you have to insert this framework on work that's done about talks about social mobilization in a place like India, which is modernizing in the 20th century, bringing different people together. If they're allowed to exchange and the social mobilization is slow enough and gradual enough, you can get assimilation. But when it starts to speed up and people don't have time to assimilate, they might move in together, but they're separated into different networks, and that's when you get differentiation, which is, I mean, my understanding is that's what happened, that split Urdu and Hindi apart. At the same time, I was also looking at Paul Brass, who talks about ethnic groups, communities, nations, and then nationalities. So you have ethnic groups in pre-partition India that turn into communities, which we are familiar with, all the community politics in India, and then the idea of nation building and separating. So a lot of what allows people to turn into nationalities is this, the internal values that people have, the shared internal values. Sometimes when you look at things like language, a lot of this depends on creating values between people, or or creating myths about language or the integrity of language. And that might require manipulation of certain kinds of symbols. And you can see this plentiful in India, where language did become a religious symbol. And when these symbols are manipulated, you get to combine them into a cohesive identity. So my exploration of Urdu and Hindi saw Hindi become Hindu, equivalent to Hindu, equivalent to Hindustan. The idea that this separation of the languages kind of echoed what would become the partition of India and Pakistan. So what we have today is two different languages. The top is Nagari script Hindi, Indian. It's co-official in India alongside English. The bottom we have the Sanskritization script, which is Urdu, which is co-official with English in Pakistan. And but this isn't always the case. When you go back a few hundred years, you kind of get a sense that they were one and the same thing. So if you look at a map of, I mean, linguistically, we all know that India is very, very diverse. We have Hindi in the middle there in Uttar Pradesh. But, so approximately 400 years ago, you have 4 regional standards in the north, Khariboli, Awadhi, Rajbhasha, and Bhojpuri. So what we call Hindi and Urdu today borrows its syntax from Khariboli. So no matter how Sanskritized or Persianized Urdu or Hindi become, they're mutually intelligible. I mean, I can understand Indian TV and Bollywood cinema, but I can't understand Persian or Arabic. So Urdu in its leak form in the 1800s takes the Khariboli syntax. It's succeeded by Persian, which was the court language during the Mughals, but then the British replaced Urdu as the official language in India. And it's referred to as very different names come up to refer to this language, but it is an Indian language. It's not Arabic, it's not Farsi. It is an Indian vocabulary with different Indian syntax with different vocabularies in it. So there was a period of high Persianization that this Urdu had, and if you look at why Persian vocabulary was entering the language, you get a sense there's an economic motivator. 3 of the highest Hindu castes were trained in Urdu and Persian, and they were inserting more and more Persian vocabulary to sort of reserve really like high government employment in British India, and you get a sense that it's not about religion at this point in this Persianization is taking place. Even at that time, you have a really broad spectrum of language, which meant that people would organically choose how much Sanskrit and how much Persian to put into language. So you have Mauli's Hindi, which would have really heavy, difficult Persian vocabulary. You have Pandit's Hindi, which would be difficult Sanskrit. Munchi's Hindi, which would be intelligible, and so would pure Hindi and Eurasian with English. Written in both Nastali and Nagari, which means that the separation of these two into separate scripts happened much later. And it really is about this kind of organic choosing. You choose who you're going to speak to and where your writing is going to appear, and that's how difficult or easy you make yourself. So if you look at the vernacular styles, at this point, they haven't been assigned their defined scripts yet. In the 19th century, you do have Hindus writing excessive Persian and Arabic, you have Muslims writing in Nagari scripts. So you get this question mark of like, well, why would they get separated the way they do? And it simply is a matter of certain lower Hindu castes feeling that they're not being represented because they don't get training in Persian and Arabic. They decide, wait, we get training in Nagari script, let's push a case for Nagari to become recognized as an official language alongside Urdu. You start getting language movements, and initially a lot of these language movements are actually part of like Hindu if you see, you have these various organizations that spring up. But although their focus is initially religion, they kind of later on take on the cause of a language and a script. So that language and that script has now become a symbol for that society. And to make it congruent with this idea of India, is sort of preceding this idea of a Hindu India. And one of the things the language movement would use would be these morality plays, where suddenly Hindi in Nagari script comes to signify some kind of purity, and Sanskrit infused in it comes to signify this purity, whereas the Persian and Arabic vocabulary in an Indian language becomes undesirable because it is a Semitic vocabulary in what is perceived to be an Aryan language. Now, when I first discovered this, I mean, this is the futility of like using these kind of very redundant racial politics. It's just, it was a little absurd to me. Assigning morality and ethics, the language, and this idea of Nastali being difficult to read and Nagari being easier to read, and among other things in terms of it being impure or imperfect. And that got me thinking about, well, what is purity in language? So the fact that these movements took place is fine. I mean language movements happen, language changes organically, but to see these being continued on into the 21st century, I really kind of wanted to make a case for Urdu. It just seems really like a futile exercise. So what's happening now on Indian TV that I was speaking about earlier is this purging of Persian and Arabic from Hindi on television and infusing these long, difficult to understand Sanskrit terms on the basis that Persian and Arabic are foreign and that they are creating an impurity in Hindi vernacular. And I took opposition. I mean, I take exception to that kind of exercise. And so this is the term for it, Shuddha or purity, and it's becoming quite commonplace. You have a Shuddh Hindi Day in India where they have Hindi competitions where points are taken off for any Arabic or Persian or Turkish word used. And I'm actually don't want to go further. Actually, we should go because I don't know how long I've been speaking. But something like Urdu / Hindi or Hindustani, whatever you call it, that has Sanskrit and Indic and Turkish and Persian and Arabic terms in it, that represents a kind of secularism that people would want in the 21st century. It should be heralded as something that's like a cultural heritage, and the fact that it's being slowly removed from contemporary Indian society, I have questions about what it hopes to achieve. Things like the Shuddh Hindi Day that have become very popular, and the Shuddh Hindi on television as well. And like historically, really Shuddh Hindi was something comical that was used in Indian films. If you wanted to make a pun or a joke, you had someone who spoke very heavy Sanskrit, and not at all something that was. That's an image from Shuddh Hindi Day where insert the merits of Hindi versus any Hindi with Arabic or Farsi. And this, thank you to Ahmad who just said this to me 2 weeks ago as examples of that it's taking place now, and these language movements that I thought had become redundant or fallen out of practice are still currently quite alive and can be seen.
So I have a couple questions, but you guys also please feel free to ask whatever.
I have so many more slides, but I think we'll be talking for
And I guess, so my first question would be, what is the status of Urdu in Hindi today, in India today? Like, you're talking about a separation between what once used to be Hindustani, kind of a spectrum, into these two separate languages. Sometimes they're religiously associated, Hindi with Hindus Urdu with Muslims, which is pretty false because most of the Muslims in India don't speak Urdu. So, I mean, is there a suppression of Urdu as a language, or is it kind of more of just a separation into separate?
I think, I mean, at least my understanding is that there is a suppression. With examples, things like the Shahidi Day, or the taking out of Urdu and Persian from television, which is a mass medium. So I feel like it is a very, and also in terms of Bollywood, there's a dropping of Farsi consonants, which makes, if you grow up as an Urdu-speaking person, you see your language spoken with these mild sort of like alterations, you understand that it is a suppression, not just.
And why do you think it's happening? Does it speak to Islamophobia within India? What are, like, I guess when Hindi was first kind of, maybe, I don't know how to say, like separated or established more as languages, or more, it was bound up with, it was a very class thing, it was bound up with nationalist movements. So I guess the question is, who speaks Urdu today? Because Urdu does have these connotations of being very literary, very high, not for the masses, as opposed to Hindi, which is a much more popular language. So,
well, between the two of them, they are both quite popular when they stay within this the register of being not using heavy Persian or heavy Sanskrit. But in terms of Urdu in India today, it's being made, it's being phased out quite consciously in terms of film, in terms of television. I mean, I think that's where this started from. I mean, the fact that the Urdu defense movements couldn't really give much of a competition was the fact that such a small minority of Indians were Muslims, and to somehow even Urdu became congruent with this idea of being Muslim, which anyone with even like a superficial understanding of Urdu culture would know that there's nothing Islamic about it. I mean, it draws in very secular Persian sources, not really Islamic Arabic ones. So, and even when you refer to Urdu culture, it is it's steeped in poetry, and alcohol plays a big part. A certain type of culture plays a big part of it, which is quite un-Islamic. So there's nothing particular. So I mean, it's a separation, and I think it's also it might have something to do with carving out unique and singular Hindu identity for India, which again is weird because it's a country that represents again different faiths and different languages. I mean, when Hindi became the official language of India, there was a lot of agitation in the South. That I understand they have their own problem with it. And at one point, they wanted to make it the only official language of India and also get rid of English. That again would seem really absurd.
and so what? I guess one big question is how much. What kind of role does Pakistan play in this?
Well, the research really was conducted with Bollywood in mind, so I had really focused on Urdu and Hindi in India. If I was looking at Pakistan, I would play devil's advocate and look at Pakistan's own language movements, which were in relation to Bengali. There was a point in which they wanted to make Urdu the official language of East Pakistan, which is Bengali speaking. So there was agitation there against Urdu. So I would play devil's advocate if I was looking at Pakistan. It's not really something that I do.
Or rather, how much of this, I guess, not suppression or maybe waning of Urdu is based on a lot of the Muhajirs, like moving the separation, just the partition. Like, as an example, something you're seeing in Kashmir with Kashmiri is that since a lot of the Hindus, the Farsi and the Arabic going the other way, and that's simply a facet of people moving, leaving, not speaking Kashmiri anymore.
I think that's a good point. I think Sanskritization, and I was speaking to Sunil, who's one of our Arab artists. I mean, it takes place in other languages in India, but those are organic developments. They're not in opposition, like an Arabic or Persian or a Muslim past, which seems to be the case in India. Is that it's after the partition, although the 50s does have high Urdu culture in terms of Bollywood, it's after the 70s some kind of fracture happens that it has to be merged, it has to be replaced, it has to become singularly like in terms of Urdu in Pakistan is like the mother tongue, which is 50%. They have their own provincial politics.
But Urdu is one of the national languages, so everyone.
It's an official language, and it's co-official alongside English. A lot of people speak it, but the project really wasn't looking at this. The state of Urdu in Pakistan.
You mentioned that in the 50s up to the 70s there was still a large presence of Urdu in Bollywood. I agree with this, and it has dropped since. But don't you think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the people who are writing the scripts and so on are educated in Hindi themselves? So, I mean, how do you expect them to have the Persianized vocabulary? It's just that the education system has changed over time. So.
Well, when I initially wrote the paper for the state, I was kind of looking at television and not so much Bollywood, because Bollywood maintains quite a lot of Persian and Arabic vocabulary in its songs, and they become a really big part of the poetics of the popular Bollywood songs. It's not so much the vocabulary, it's mostly the consonants. I don't expect anything. It's just in terms of having artists in Bollywood that represent Muslims. There seem to be getting fewer and fewer. And recently, we just saw it today, there is a film set in that background that isn't doing so well because people can't understand the Urdu in it because it's not something that they're taught. So that's an organic development that would happen. You know, writers would choose to register. But what happens on television, it's difficult to understand regardless of where you're from. I don't know if I answered your question. I don't expect. I'm not really in a position to expect.
There are all sorts of parallels. You brought up this one slide from Haryana. I think it was last month, the chief minister of one of the South Indian states told his policemen that they all must start learning Urdu to be able to understand people around them. So the movements are happening in both directions. I mean, and not only that way. I mean, our government, the government of India, is getting rid of words. You must have heard of how the French came up with words for like computer and CD-ROM in French, and then everyone was like, should we take them, should we not? So India did the same thing. We have a department of Hindi which is meant to translate documents, and you have words like computer, and then we make words which are complex and nonsensical. So the government's official line as of today is get rid of all of this, bring back Hindi, Urdu, English into one. Whatever is commonly spoken is what should be used in official documents at least. So, but in the script, which is understood by most people.
Oh, in the script that is understood.
Yes, but the words can be from Urdu, can be borrowed from English, from Hindi. That's the government.
Yeah, so that kind of represents the fidelity of trying to do. I mean, I feel like people get a sense of it, and if you start infusing this difficult Sanskrit, at one point people are just going to say no. But it wasn't really that this was happening that was being looked at in this research. It was why it was happening, and to sort of the distancing of like a Muslim past or a Mughal past was in certain sectors of society.
It's not only that. If you think about it, I mean, I belong to my grandparents were Urdu speakers themselves, and they've learned to read and write in Urdu. They can't read Hindi at all, and we don't look at it as well. But that would be a familiar thing because we understand it better. What I'm trying to get at is there was definitely what the castes that you mentioned, that also included Muslims, and there was definitely the cornering of government and clerical jobs at a level because you understood the language. What is English today, essentially?
Yeah, it's exactly the same.
It's exactly the same thing. So if you know English today, it's as good as knowing Urdu maybe 100 odd years or 80 years ago. It's not much of a difference in that. And if there's a movement against that by people who don't know a certain language, isn't that justified? I mean,
it's not. I
mean, it's like a defense of English in a country like India, whose language, I mean, our first language is not English. English is from our colonial past, right? So is someone standing up for English against another language, for another language, is he wrong? He or she wrong?
I feel like these recent, at least from the 90s onwards, movements aren't coming from Indians who would prefer to speak very heavy Sanskrit. I feel like that there's a political wing that would use this. I can't imagine anyone saying that they would like a lot of Sanskrit in their Hindi, or that represents them. It really seems to be coming in opposition to Persian and Arabic being considered foreign in India. I don't know how
Arguably they are foreign. I mean, they are considered colonial languages, just as English.
Yeah, of course. No, it's fine. But it's a type of, I feel like it's a type of pedantry or pedantics that can get absurd levels, which is what I noticed in television. Like it's not a way any of my Indian friends speak. It's not a way I don't really understand why it has to get racialized to that extent with this idea of purity. That's the only thing that struck to me as a little odd. I mean, if you put Sanskrit in Hindi, is that a pure Hindi? Because it's not, you don't make Sanskrit into Hindi, which is again, Hindi is syntactically Khari-Boli, it's an Indian language, Urdu is an Indian language, Pakistanis and Indians understand Urdu and Hindi. It's an Indian, no Arab or Persian or Turkish person is going to come into this and understand what we're saying to one another. But when you start moving these away from one another, then they become almost foreign to oneself.
It's not only actually Urdu. In India, even English, like you said, they sort of want to remove the English from India, because I'm from Karnataka and we have this thing like all the number plates, all the shop fronts should all be in Kannada. They were not even Hindi. It's all about the regions in India. They have different regions, different languages, and everybody wants their own language in the front. So it's like everything should be in Kannada. So you had all the number plates of vehicles in Kannada, and then they realized that the police, when they really want to take down the numbers, they do not get it. So then they're like, okay, we'll get back to English. So it's not about just one language. It's like in every part of India, you have this thing about putting your language in the front and running for the topmost position. And like you said, Urdu, it's not that they want to remove Urdu, but it's like they want the Sanskrit to be up. So it's not about removing any language, it's about putting our language in front. And mostly I think it's now in India, it's to do with the political upheaval that India is going and the Hinduization of the ruling things also. People want to put that thing forward and move and get the politics there. It's all about the...
Yeah, no, I mean, you basically summed up exactly what I'm saying, is that the language is being used for political and it's being fused with religious ideology that maybe the language didn't have in the first place, which is when you look at Urdu literature, it's written in both scripts. When you look at Hindu writers in the 1800s, they're writing in both scripts and all sorts of vocabularies. It's, if you can have that kind of fluidity, until recently, why make these divisions in these very arbitrary ways now? That's just the question that this sort of set out to look at.
Yeah, actually I think really we're talking about one language, I mean grammatically, etc., and it's a matter of two different scripts, right? Yes. Also I think in terms of how one talks about nationality and such, we should really maybe think of imagined community, Geertz's idea, right? Yeah. And where, in fact, Bollywood is listened all over the world, and it's all sort of one community, you know. The politicization, of course, it happened earlier on in terms of creating this sort of government language. No? But as you said, I mean, even films and television, it was sort of laughed at because people don't really use it. Yeah? Yeah. In terms of Urdu, these days, I mean, for a while it was sort of being erased, but even a place like Delhi, the capital, they actually have put, you know, Devanagari, English, Urdu, and Punjabi. So it is there, and there actually is government support for Urdu, even though the irony is that where was Urdu, right? It's between Agra, Lucknow, etc. And the problem actually had been that there weren't enough Urdu teachers. But also I think, in Andhra Pradesh, because of Telangana, actually Urdu is being supported in South India. So it's a little more complicated. It's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. And even commentary, more critically by contemporary filmmakers, is that it always looks like something that's inevitable, that languages get phased out or slow down or speed up.
But I think it's not really, I mean, in terms of popular culture, if you see Ek Tha Tiger, mashallah, mashallah, I mean, people understand this, and with Javed Akhtar and,
Of course, and everything's such an important part of the popular culture, which is why it just always seemed odd to me that this wasn't being pushed on TV, or that it was pushed on TV and then somehow fizzled out. In the 90s, it was like Indian television really pluralistic, reflected all the different sort of minorities that live in India, all the different the whole North-South thing was investigated, and even that seems to be disappearing, and then all the arcs seem to revolve around this very Hindu, very Sanskritized sort of cultural practices. It seems a little odd, and I think it might have a short shelf life. I don't know. It might. A lot of people might not relate to it, and then
in India it is the size of like Europe.
It's the size of Western
and
Europe.
each of those guys, each country there has its own.
In India, it's quite to see the contrast of linguistic states, and it's perhaps not that way in Western.
No, but that actually, Sardar Patel actually said it out that way. I mean, that was part of the idea.
But it's not the case. If you think about it, this is not a problem of India and Pakistan, of Hindi and Urdu. It's a universal problem of human condition. Whenever there's a source of separation, they will go for the language as the first thing. And I just have a personal experience. I'm Serbian, and the conflict that Yugoslavia went through, the borders were drawn on the level of the language. The first thing, it was like, before the bullet started, the language came about. Before the separation of Yugoslavia, it was Serbo-Croat language. It's the same language with a difference on a dialect. I mean. And when the separation happened, there was, maybe it's not good for me to speak about what happened in Croatia, but I'm just totally unbiased. There was a tendency to create a national identity around the language. So it was like, it's not the Serbo-Croat language, it's Croatian. And it's so different that they even formed a body to establish a language, and they started to invent the words. And the same thing happened as it happened in Hindi. They started to invent the word for computer, which is so silly. They started to invent the words for nonsense things. And the first basically channel for infusing this and spreading it was the television. So you would start having news in a language like stuffed with words that people are laughing on. They're inventing. So what happened is it didn't survive. The project was pushed by political parties that were ultra-nationalists. It was a political project that you can go and put through a couple of editors in television, and just give them the scripted things, and you have to use this, like the guy in The Millionaire or something like that, and it will have a mass audience, and they would think like I don't know, marketing agency that is pushing this, that this will pick up, but just a couple of years afterwards, 10 years afterwards, it just it disappeared in the sand, and I say it's just people are speaking the same language, so nothing will change. But also there was a religious context, also the separation between the Catholics and the Orthodox and many other things. So it's a common thing that we do when we have no better job but to create separation where there is, I say, so much in common. So.
No, that's exactly how I feel. And so when I wrote this, automatically the comments were about the same situation taking place in the Balkans or other parts of the world that have these sort of mixed ethnicity. cities, and the fact that this happens all over the world confirms the fact that it is happening.
Yeah. The Flemish also, I mean, in Belgium you have also a very important, I say, separation, the nationalist feeling around the language. And you speak the language means you are the original, the pure one, you know? But when we solve the Babylon puzzle, I think we'll solve all the problems in the world in a way. So.
How systematic is this? Like right now you're saying Sanskrit, which is quite a dead language. These words are difficult, the vocabulary is difficult, but what's being taught in schools right now? Are kids growing up learning this very heavily Sanskritized Hindi?
Okay, so I only have a few friends that have gone through the Indian sort of school system, and it seems that when they are taught the alphabet, they purposely do leave out a consonant that was popular in Hindustan, but not like Sanskrit. So they will leave with the same club. And this, when you watch Hollywood films, there's a pun about this sometimes. I think they are taught a certain type of Sanskrit vocabulary, but there are now language programs in India that are somehow funding villages to function just with Sanskrit. Pure Sanskrit. And so a lot of people
actually, I know Sanskrit professors, the best in the world. And the problem in India today is actually finding Sanskrit teachers. Wallah, yeah.
You don't have Sanskrit in the schools unless it is a language that you take as an elective.
Yeah.
And by the end of the course, nobody learns how to talk
in Sanskrit. No, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't do it, which is why I thought this idea of having villages and funding them to just function.
Like when I was, I did schooling here, but when I shifted to India, they took Sanskrit as an elective because they had very little studying to do, and you didn't have to answer like how you had Urdu, Hindi, English. You had like question answers and stories and stuff. You didn't have to do that in Sanskrit. Just by heart some stuff, and plus your paper is over. So you don't actually learn the language at the end of it.
No, I just want to say that at the same time when Hindi is getting Sanskritized, there's Tamil Nadu reject Hindi totally. Like, or Kerala, there's nobody from Kerala going to talk Hindi. Because it's an alien language. But everybody talks same time English. You know, Tamil Nadu, they strictly reject Hindi. So, I mean, so it's I think India is a very experimental democratic piece. So it's very tough to figure out, you know, because so much dialect, so much language. Like Orissa, one village talk 22 languages. Can you imagine, like in just Orissa? And there is a small Karnataka, one small village, they speak only Sanskrit. But the tongue is Sanskrit. So it's good. I mean, I don't know, I just want to add this thing to it.
Is interesting.
Yeah. It's like one side says, okay, we want Hindi, but the other side is, you know, we don't want. We want something else. So it's always because Hindi is very above Maharashtra is Hindi. If somebody is speaking, you know, below that when south, I don't think so. It's not. Nobody is interested in Hindi.
Yeah. So I think I asked you this question 2 days ago. Is when Hindi does become it is an official language in India. How? It's
actually not an official language. It's a proposed official language still now. Yeah, one of the proposed official language.
Yeah.
It's not a national language.
It's official in more than.
So you have a list of official languages for India. You don't have one.
It's not one national law.
That would make confused.
Yeah. Sorry, I know that each state has its own.
Every state has its own language, but even in India, you have a list of official languages. There's no one language because.
No, of course, yeah, no. I think each state has its own official language, and English is usually sometimes co-official, but I think for the whole country, I think it's English.
Not yet.
For the whole country, you have a list of languages. I don't remember the whole list now. But and each state has its own.
No, all the proposed language is what is you see in the Indian currency. All the all the language, the currency is written. Those are the proposed official languages of nation. Yeah.
Was it earlier, 22, and they just started 4 more about 10 years ago, and I think, I remember, I think Sydney was one of them.
It's a continent.
Yeah, it's a continent.
Everyone's
Still experimenting.
It's the size of Europe, and of course.
Yeah, and it's a small baby, 60-year-old, with democracy.
How much of this is just
Thousands of years of traditions. To find ways to unite.
Because how much of this do you think is paralleled or due to the kind of rise, again, since the 1990s of increased like regional programming?
It probably is that. It's just that, I mean, yeah, it's probably right on that. It probably is that. It just seems odd to have to see that in this sort of setting in terms of it being a popular medium.
All of this is all private television, of course. This is not government. None of the television programs are put forward sponsored, forced down by the government that start using such and such language. So
there was like when your radio came about, that was very administrative in Hindi.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I kind of mentioned that in my writing too, is that if Hindi is a debate in contemporary India, then why not see that opinion of people like Gandhi, who was very much for a 2-script solution and wrote a lot in both scripts, in both languages, and was very fluent and fluid. And even Nehru, I cited as he complained quite regularly and frequently in Parliament that he couldn't understand his own speeches when they were delivered on the radio because they were so Sanskritized. So if you already have a common register that's just flexible, I would love to see that maintained. I think that would be beneficial.
I think that stays by itself, the nature of Urdu, and we now call it, let's say, Urdu/Hindi. Originally, the Urdu was a language which different nationalities spoke, used as a medium to talk to each other, and now we live in Dubai, and we have a person coming from Kerala, let's say a person who cannot speak English, he's a laborer, he comes from Kerala, and a person comes from the northwest frontier of Pakistan and lives in Dubai. The only thing they can speak with each other is the Urdu/Hindi. So to me, it has this amazing appeal, universality of the language, that everybody, when it comes down to talk to somebody, you don't know his language, you'll come down to Hindi. And even when we go to talk to some local people here, I mean, they don't prefer to speak English, they would like to speak in Hindi, Urdu, whatever you want to call it. So this amazing thing makes me feel that there's a very, very big number of people in the world, in this part of the world, who speak this language, but it doesn't have any recognition. It's not even make a speech. When a person comes from Pakistan or India, they will make speech in English, and there's no recognition for this highly universal language.
In fact, I want to wonder what is the person's intention of using all these Sanskrit terms. If I think about it, it has like a general knowledge program, and I feel like he uses it for effect. He would kind of somehow give that program intellectual edge in that sense. On the other hand, he would. I find that program quite funny at times. How he throws in those words which nobody understands at all. I agree with that part. On the other hand, he comes from a school where I'm sure he can speak proper Urdu. In fact, he's only last guy who could speak and deliver dialogues, in a beautiful way. I think any of the modern actors can speak Hindi also in that fluent way. And me coming from Bombay, I think my Hindi is kind of horrible. I mean, I think really educated, it was kind of secondary thing. We went from English and Hindi by itself also is becoming like a second language, and people use it in a very casual way now. The language itself is getting interested. And I feel like this Sanskrit thing is some kind of, like there's so many mythological programs now coming on television. Again, they use all these high-ended Sanskrit words to kind of create effect for me. And then, I was a kid, like we would kind of use these words to kind of make fun in that sense. There was no leading towards this is a pure language I'm going to use. Like some words from Mahabharata or Ramayana and Visa, like you just go back and in French, you kind of use that words to kind of have these mock fights or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I would really kind of wonder what is Amitabh Bachchan's intention right now to kind of throw in those words, because they just kind of add some drama. And he's got the capacity to deliver those dialogues and words with that. And he's got a big history in films. People look and listen to those words with his admiration.
No, I mean, it's interesting that it's him, because he has been known for playing such diverse parts in Bollywood and speaking like impeccable Urdu and Hindi. But I think that his choice of words might be reflected by the fact that his father was one of the most famous like Hindi poets. So maybe if Amitabh speaks a certain type of vocabulary, it makes sense, and that's fine.
His father used tons of Urdu words.
Exactly, but he's known for Hindi contributions to Hindi literature, but what type of Hindi was that? When you come sit down to look at it, it had Urdu, it had Hindi, and it's fine, you know. I mean, I think people who work with writing should be free from these kind of connections.
I think coming to the point you said earlier, a lot of modern writers in Hindi cinema, Bollywood cinema. I think our kind of the copywriters and advertising were writing films for Bollywood now, and they were quite distant from pure Hindi, even Sanskrit Bollywood. And I think with time I wouldn't be surprised, but Sanskrit and Urdu will just fade out from even public programs or performing media, since because people don't speak about it. It's just going to become like a vintage language. It's like using the word high from Shakespeare or something. That's how we kind of use those Sanskrit words to make fun.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the irony is that English phases out sort of phases out everything. But I mean, in the process of
something like Shakespearean English is something that's still part of society, but it's not that we speak about it, we're informed about it. You know? And I would say in a similar way, that he uses those words, but he's not comical because you take him seriously.
Yeah, so this is basically Shakespearean. I mean, it's in reverse. I mean, you're going towards a language that's a little harder to understand rather than colloquial or easier to understand.
But it's actually the vocabulary, it's not the language.
No, of course, yes,
so
it's
a little different,
I mean, the language, like, which I keep really asserting is that it is an Indian language.
Well, yeah, both languages are the same grammatically, exactly same, same letters, aspects, you know what I mean? And it's just vocabulary, Sanskrit vocabulary, as opposed to Persianic vocabulary or Arabic.
What I quickly is that in fact, I speak a lot of Pakistani taxi drivers and we have a lot of conversations, and they use beautiful Urdu words, and I feel horrible that I don't understand them. So I kind of get in conversation with them and ask them, what does that word mean? What does this word mean? And the way even the diction is so much more clear and sharper than Hindi-speaking, people in that sense. So I really kind of, I don't know what reasons, I don't know getting the reasons in terms of the split that I spoke about, which possibly could be the Hindu intention. But in fact, a lot of best poetry was written in Urdu, and somehow that's fading out from Indian.
Yeah, well, it was my aesthetic. I mean, it was a project that was motivated by an aesthetic concern, and I do think it's a beautiful language, And I would like to. I would like to stay in some shape or form within, dive within how the poet speaks, but just to make the script disappear or make certain phrases of vocabulary disappear on account of the fact that they're not needed anymore or causing impurity is something that I was looking at.
I think Bollywood was initially kind of run by local speaking that has any influence.
How much is technology contributing? Because you're getting something now where Urdu is written in the Nastaliq script, but because it's notoriously difficult to translate to the screen or to type, you're getting it often written in Nash, and like the same script that's used for Arabic. So how much does that?
I did actually have a very frustrating project I was working on where I had to type in Urdu, and it turned out that they haven't been able to type it Urdu. So this is another thing that's perhaps adding to this, is that we haven't been able to. It's constantly transliterated. Yeah, it's adding to it.
In fact, I recall that I actually knew someone whose father was an editor of a local publication, and they would have a handwritten newspaper every day. I don't know if that was happening in Bombay itself.
No, it was happening until recently.
I had a question. I was interested in that slide you showed, the one that had the Urdu, one word in Urdu and one word in Hindu. So I'm just to understand, so like you're saying that a long time ago, basically in the movies, they would they speak like half Urdu, half Hindi, or is it just the Hindi with less Sanskrit?
The second.
The second one, right?
Yeah.
But then okay.
Yeah, because they're one language.
And then was Urdu taught in schools in India, and is it before, or was
I think there's always been in India an option of being able. As far as I know, you have in some cases people have at the college level an option to study it.
Yeah. But like in Indian shows and stuff, they don't really use Urdu, so it's just it's like, or was it that in the 50s or 60s in Indian shows they'd use Urdu? It was always just Hindi, but the less Sanskrit.
Well,
I'm just curious about the Urdu presence on TV.
So the Indian television really takes off in the 90s. That I'm familiar with, and there is a very sort of like 100 shades of gray kind of situation where you have all types of vocabulary, both Sanskrit and Persian, depending on what kind of character you're denoting. The reference to television was simply that more recently, some parts of television are getting heavily Sanskritized.
And how is the low-budget production?
Sorry?
The low-budget productions, like the very basic comedy shows, or is it over-Sanskritized as well, or?
I've only noticed the trend in soaps.
Soaps?
Yeah, that's at least my understanding of it, is television that is geared towards middle class, and mostly female audience, maybe even. I noticed the trend in that, so I can't really speak.
There's a very fine line between what's Urdu and what's Hindi, right? Like, you don't really know the origins of the word. I remember I did this a few months ago. I was sitting with my mom and looking at the Wikipedia article on Persian words, Persian loan words to other languages, and like half an hour later we were still on C, and we had found so many Hindi words which we thought were Hindi, and they were actually of Persian origin. And where are you going to draw that line that that it's overtly Sanskritized when most of, well, it has to be understood, right? So it has to be
that's
understood
actually the beauty of looking at language, is that to have, let's say, Hindi on television, and you have words that have an Arabic source or a Persian source or a Sanskrit source or another regional standard source, and then you have elements of Sanskrit sources that are connected to Persian sources from another ancient, like in terms of both being Indo-European languages, and so yes, there are a lot of words in Urdu, a lot of vocabulary in Urdu that is not Persian, Arabic, or Turkish, and not Sanskrit. So it's clearly of an Indic origin. So you can, this isn't about saying that it shouldn't be like this, or it's extreme. It's just a question mark of why would you want a very difficult to understand popular TV show, and the investigation was just about that.
I was just kind of curious about, like, in relation to your project, also your relationship to the map, right? Because in a way, there's a bit, I'm sure you're familiar with it, there's this very beautiful text called In the Mirror of Urdu that was written by Punjab, and it kind of follows or thinks through, like, what happened with partition, because that's in relation to what happened to the Iraq partition. And I mean, in the same way that you spoke of the fact that if you go to like the port in Sharjah, you have Somalis speaking with you, and it just seems that there's definitely a bit of effort, which is why Ajahn only speaks the language he does, because his affinity to the Gujarat government is not kind of in question. And so your focus on television or on Bollywood
on one hand, versus also your defense question around the state of Urdu. It might, I mean, I'm just kind of curious about whether that another way to look at the state of Urdu, because what I'm thinking is also to think of how it's, remapped itself. Like a lot of the coastal communities in India, their relations to East Africa, like Urdu is also
of course,
right? So I mean, it's just kind of that they are in that.
Yeah, no, it's diasporic. I mean, you can be in Brick Lane in London, and then you will see the, the signage. And I mean, I mean, it's totally sort of dislocated and then sort of grown itself out of that.
Right.
It's just
because in India, I would say that something quite drastic was obviously done in the education system, such that even those, we found that, speaking of your family, you might have studied Urdu, which is fact that you don't study it anymore, or much, very few people study it. Obviously has implications in the daily life, but like Bombay is like a must, right? Like you don't speak. If you try to stop me, if you try to kind of say, I'm going to speak, even if you just say Urdu and English and nothing else, you find yourself with like more English words than anything, than any of the other two. And so, but yeah, the question is basically the question of the comment is basically about like there might be another map, to kind of consider this question of Urdu and where it's gone, rather than just the focal point of Urdu was gender, and whether that was part of the concern or is it focused only on?
No, it was very much within the parameters of, because if you even go into Pakistan, there's like a whole quagmire around. So it really wasn't about that per se. It was really about the fact that it's a very contemporary issue. And why?
Any other questions?
So where are the Indian politics right now? Like what's happening in terms of tendencies, nationalistic tendencies? I mean, soon elections are coming up, and for a long time you had a Muslim president, and how is this affecting the whole language, if there is a language strategy or environment, do you know?
I think we were just talking about it with someone just the other day where we were debating what's going to happen. I think you just said that BJP's term is up.
It's about time.
It's about time that they came back.
I mean, I'm supporting it.
And so, of course, it's totally cyclical, comes up, goes down, but I feel like where we are right now, I mean, I'm not Indian, and I only have a very sort of cursory understanding of Indian politics, which are quite dense and complicated, but it seems there is parts of the right that are getting righter, and then that might be an economic thing, and that might be something that we're witnessing in all different sort of geographies in the world, not just in India. And of course, when the right gets brighter, it does latch on to things like language. So maybe this thing in Haryana really is about changing landscape. But the fact is that, if we move away from language and just look at religion, scholars like Amar Mufti have likened the situation of Muslims in India equivalent to the Jews in Europe in the 19th century. That is the level of persecution you're talking about. Not in language, but just the sort of economic reality of a large number of Muslims living in India is this marginalization, this misrepresentation. So yes, there's that aspect of it. This is just one small facet of that political landscape, which is just so much more convenient to have a visual symbol for something, for someone to marginalize, on the basis of that. So I'm not an Indian Muslim. I can't really speak for how or what the experience of that is, but no one would argue that it's a tough situation. It's a minority that's really underrepresented.
Yeah, but
in television, it's really
yeah, but I think it's a sad thing. But I think I shouldn't say anything. But to be Shia in Lahore today, it's better to be Shia in India. Wallah. Yeah.
It's further than that.
It's totally further than that. So, and yeah, there are many different Muslim communities throughout India, you know, and some of them are happy. You know.
I mean, I'm just quoting on.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I'm just saying something. That's all. That's all I'm
It's
saying.
also to do with the regions.
Yeah.
Like when I go to India, in my village, in the surrounding villages, I have no problem at all. I move around freely. But then when I move to another city where the situation is different, and my neighbors, they smile at me and talk to me nicely, but I know inside they are like, oh, she's a Muslim, we should be, of course, scared of her. So it's not about the whole of India. It's places in India, yes.
And recently, if anyone's been reading about the Zafar murder, it's been made into a small story. It's actually a big story. I would encourage you to read that if you are not familiar with what's been happening with Zafar with Muslims.
But then we can't tell, okay, in India, the Muslims are treated bad.
No, it's just a sense of communal awareness.
India is such a big country. We have different places, different sort of people, different languages. Like every place you go, there's a different situation. So I cannot say, okay, I do not want to go to India because it's so bad for me. No, India is my country, yeah. But I do say, yeah, I'm not at all happy with it too. There are places where things are bad, but there are places things are good too. So it's like everywhere.
Yeah, no, I mean,
and like he said, yes, in Pakistan, like we can't say Pakistan is the safest place. Let's all move to Pakistan.
I would never ever put Pakistan and India next to each other in this.
I think it's
not
with every
intention of this was not about Pakistan. The card, the one card on the table is.
You asked about the economic situation. Swindlers, none of the West in India at least. They are one of the most marginalized communities, rather the most marginalized community in India. But, and that is becoming only worse, like election rhetoric and so on.
But a lot of the jargon around the sort of linguistic cleansing or language purification is, it is racial or it is ideological, and it is constructed. It is the manufactured way of looking at a society that is supposed to be ethnically diverse and racially diverse.
How unified is India? Like, I know it's really ignorant, but I've never been there, and I've never seen any person. But it just seems like 22 languages in states. It seems very inefficient to me, and very ununified if you have 22 languages. So I'm curious as to how are people. Is there a survey, mass survey, where people are asked, do you want to be unified or do you want to have one language? And do people want it, or do some provinces or states want to just separate themselves and have their own laws, their own language? And how does that affect the economy and the unification of the country? And how does that affect the industrialization and the evolution of, I know it's a big question, I have so many questions right now, so
when I started reading about this, there was the sense that the discourse around language and politics in India goes back like 250 years, in terms of just people writing essays about what kind of language Indians should speak and write in. So it's a very, very dense discourse, which has a really huge public element in it too, which is not always in sync with what a government, governmental programs. Like, of course, the placement of British colleges in pre-partition India, census, all of these things automatically create, stratas and boxes for people. What do you do if you're half Muslim, half Hindu, half something? That can be uncovered. You can't take that and it's not really, it's a country, but it has, to answer your question, I don't know how, you can only ask it how unified they feel.
I think you're getting a situation where it's increasingly fractured or increasingly more, I don't know, piecemeal or balkanized, if that's a word, in the sense of like you're constantly going to get, it's been happening in the last few decades, like new states created with a smaller kind of community, a smaller boundary, more specific language.
Is that, I don't know, saying of India itself, is that actually, is it getting better? Do Indian people feel like the country is getting better as a country, like is it growing, or is that one of the factors that is bringing it down? Not population-wise. Just the, you get a sense of, like, let's say UAE is growing, or a country is growing, or is language a big factor in a lot of the questions, economy and growth, industrialization, all of these things? Is it a big, I don't know.
No, I mean, I think any answer to that would try and oversimplify the lived experience of a billion people that is, different. Everyone's experience of the situation is different, but, so I don't think you could actually ever answer your question.
Roughly, I mean, if English is the language of English, so if you can speak decent English, you learn at least double of minimum wage. If you're just earning at the back, then you learn double of that sometimes clerical job. So it's upward mobility. English is local regional languages, no matter what you can do economically.
Yes, I understand that, but is that helping the entire country? Like, it helps some people to get double the wage, but is the rest of the country also getting up? I know it's
too big of a question.
Yeah, I just don't know enough to actually understand, so I'm just gonna listen and
I think their GDP is better than the US right now, so they're good. From an oversimplified American